lying on the stretcher with broken ribs. I waited for my mother's concern. Instead, she demanded, "Transfer $4,200 immediately. My card cannot be declined in the VIP lounge." I realized then that I was not her daughter, just her backup account. Comment where you are right now, because I am about to push a button that sends my family into freefall. My name is Noelle Harmon. I am 33 years old, and the first thing I tasted when consciousness slammed back into my body was the metallic tang of copper and the acrid, chemical dust of a deflated airbag. The world was a blur of spinning red and blue lights that cut through the gray dusk of the highway. Sound returned in a rush, the screech of a siren, the rhythmic hydraulic hiss of the ambulance doors closing, and a voice, close to my ear, sharp and commanding. "Stay with me. Noelle. Can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." I tried to nod, but a lance of pure fire shot up my right side, seizing my breath in my throat. My ribs, they felt like jagged puzzle pieces grinding against one another. I gasped, a wet, ragged sound that frightened me more than the darkness I had just woke up from. My right wrist was immobilized, throbbing with a dull, heavy bass beat that synced with my racing heart. "Easy, easy," the voice soothed. A face swam into view above me, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense jawline, framed by hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. Her badge read, "Tessa. You took a pretty hard hit. Noelle, we are en route to St. Jude's. Your vitals are stable, but I need you to stay awake for me. Do not close those eyes." I blinked, trying to scrape the fog from my brain. The memories of the last hour were fractured shards. I had been driving. The radio was playing a pop song I hated but knew all the words to. I was on my way to pick up my son from the sitter. Then, a blur of motion from the intersection. A black SUV, running a red light, the sickening crunch of metal folding like wet cardboard, the world spinning, and now, this. "My son," I croaked. The words scraped my throat like sandpaper. "Is he?" "You were alone in the car. Honey," Tessa said, her hand checking the pulse at my neck with practiced efficiency. "We checked the back seat. It was empty. You were alone." Relief washed over me. Cold and trembling. He was safe. He was with the sitter. He was waiting for me. "We found your phone," Tessa said, holding up my cracked smartphone. The screen was spiderwebbed, but it was lit up. "Do you want me to call someone? Your husband? We found an emergency contact listed as Ethan." Ethan. My husband. He would be terrified. He would leave his office mid-meeting, drive like a maniac, and tear the hospital apart to get to me. He would hold my hand and tell me it was going to be okay. But as I looked at the phone, a different kind of panic set in. It was a conditioned reflex, ingrained in me over 3 decades of psychological wiring. It was the first of the month. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. "No," I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Not yet. Give me the phone." Tessa frowned, her professional mask slipping just enough to show confusion. "Ma'am, you are in shock. You really should let me call." "Please," I begged. Struggling to lift my good hand, the movement sent fresh waves of nausea rolling through my gut. "I have to handle something urgent. Just give me a minute." Reluctantly, Tessa placed the shattered device in my left hand. "Okay, 1 minute, then I'm calling Ethan." The phone felt heavy, like a brick of lead. I stared at the screen. My vision swam, but I could make out the time. It was 5:12 in the afternoon. As if summoned by a dark ritual, the screen lit up. The caller ID flashed a picture I had taken years ago, a smiling, elegant woman in a wide-brimmed hat, holding a glass of champagne, Mom. The ringtone seemed to drill directly into my fractured ribs. I knew I should not answer. I knew I was lying on a stretcher, bleeding, broken, and likely concussed. A normal person would let it go to voicemail. A normal daughter would expect her mother to be calling because she felt a disturbance in the universe. A maternal instinct sensing her child was in danger. But I was not a normal daughter, and Darlene Whitaker was not a normal mother. My thumb slid across the cracked glass to answer. I brought the phone to my ear, my hand trembling not from the cold, but from the Pavlovian fear that governed my entire adult life. "Hello," I whispered. There was no pause, no hesitation, no, "Hello, sweetie." "Noelle," my mother's voice came through, crisp and impatient, cutting through the background noise of an airport terminal. "I am standing at the counter of the Sapphire Lounge, and the girl here is looking at me like I am a pauper. My card was declined." I closed my eyes. The ambulance hit a pothole, and I bit my lip to keep from screaming. "Mom, Do not mom me right now," she snapped. "I am flying to Milan tonight. This is the important trip. Remember the one with the girls from the club? I explicitly told you I needed the limit raised for the deposit on the villa." I tried to draw a breath, but my lung capacity was reduced to shallow sips of air. "I'm in an ambulance." "What?" she asked, but the tone wasn't concern. It was the tone of someone who hadn't heard clearly because of a bad connection. "I was in a car accident. I managed to get out," the words spacing themselves out between ragged breaths. "EMT. Hospital. I think my ribs are broken." Silence stretched on the line for 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, a foolish, childish part of me hoped. I hoped she would gasp. I hoped she would drop her Chanel bag. I hoped she would ask where I was. "Okay," Darlene said, her voice dropping an octave, not with sympathy, but with annoyance. "Look, Noelle, I understand that is happening to you, but I am standing here right now with a line of people behind me. This is humiliating. The machine says insufficient funds. I need you to transfer $4,200 immediately, not tomorrow, now." The number hung in the air between us, suspended in the sterile atmosphere of the ambulance. $4,200. "Mom," I said, tears pricking the corners of my eyes, tears of pain. Yes, but mostly of a sudden, crushing clarity. "I'm bleeding. I might need surgery." "And you have insurance for that." "Noelle," she replied smoothly, dismissing my physical trauma as a clerical detail. "Ethan has that wonderful policy. You will be fine. But my flight board's in 40 minutes, and if I cannot get into the lounge, I cannot network with the committee chair for the spring gala. This is my career. Noelle, this is my life. Just open the app and push the button. It takes 10 seconds. I looked up at Tessa. She was checking my blood pressure. Her brow furrowed as she watched the monitor. She could not hear the voice on the phone, but she could see the tears sliding down my temples into my hairline. She gave me a sympathetic smile, assuming I was talking to a worried husband. She had no idea. "The card?" I stammered, my brain trying to process the logic. "It shouldn't be declined. I put the money in last week." "Well, I bought those earrings for Kendra's birthday," Darlene said, her voice taking on that defensive, victimized edge she perfected years ago. "And there was the spa membership renewal. It is not my fault the cost of living has gone up. Noelle, you promised to take care of the overhead. That is the deal. You pay me back. It is obvious." You pay me back. It is obvious. That was the mantra, the scripture of the Whitaker household. Since I was 20, Darlene had instilled in me the idea that my existence was a debt I had to service. She had raised me, hadn't she? She had sacrificed her prime years to feed me and clothe me. Now that I was a successful graphic designer with a husband in finance, it was my obvious duty to ensure she maintained the lifestyle she felt she deserved. I looked at my hand, the one holding the phone. There was a smear of dried blood on my index finger. It was dark red, almost black in the dim light. I looked at the IV line Tessa had inserted into my arm. I was bleeding. I was leaking vital fluids. And on the phone, Darlene was demanding I leak financial fluids too. $4,200, she repeated, enunciating every syllable. "Transfer it to the primary checking, the one linked to the platinum card. Hurry up, Noelle." The receptionist is staring at me. A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't anger. It was colder than that. It was a sudden, absolute detachment. It was as if the collision had knocked something loose in my brain, Or perhaps knocked something back into place. I thought of my son, Leo. He was 3 years old. He was waiting for me. If I died right now, if this ambulance crashed, or if an internal bleed took me out, what would Darlene do? Would she mourn me? Or would she worry about who would pay the OA fees on her condo next month? I knew the answer, and that answer was more painful than the broken ribs. Noelle. Her voice was sharp, a command to a disobedient servant. Are you doing it? I stared at the blood on my finger. I am bleeding in 2 places. I thought, my body is bleeding, and my bank account is bleeding. If I don't stop the bleeding, I will die. Panic is a luxury for people who aren't being hunted. And I realized, lying there on that stretcher, that I had been hunted my entire adult life. I was prey. I was a resource to be harvested. Noelle. I'm opening the app, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. It didn't sound like the voice of a woman in shock. It sounded like the voice of a stranger. Good, she sighed, the tension leaving her voice. Hurry, and text me when it is done so I can tell this girl to run the card again. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't hang up. I wanted her to be there. I wanted the line to be open. With my thumb trembling slightly, I navigated to the banking app. Face ID struggled to recognize me. My face was likely bruised or swollen, but after a second attempt, the green checkmark appeared. My balance flashed on the screen. It was healthy. Ethan and I worked hard. We saved. We built, but below my main savings account was the sub-account labeled Mom, Emergency. It was an overdraft link. A direct pipeline I had set up 9 years ago, granting Darlene Whitaker access to my funds whenever her spending outpaced her reality, which was always, I looked at the transaction history, luxury spa, $600, boutique Milano, $1,200, Grandview Country Club, $800. She wasn't in an emergency. She was a parasite. Noelle, the screen is timing out. Darlene's voice tinny from the speaker I held against my chest. I took a deep breath. The pain in my ribs flared, white-hot and searing, but I welcomed it. It focused me. I did not tap transfer. I tapped the settings gear icon next to the linked account. I scrolled down, past notification preferences, past statement options. I found the toggle switch I was looking for. Authorized user Darlene Whitaker. Overdraft protection on. My thumb hovered over the switch. For 9 years, this switch had been the leash around my neck. It was the reason I worked overtime. It was the reason I wore last season's clothes while she wore Prada. It was the reason I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach every time my phone buzzed. Noelle, I don't see the notification, she barked. I looked at Tessa, who was watching me with concern. You okay, honey? She whispered. I nodded. I am going to be, I said softly. I pressed the toggle. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to revoke authorization for Darlene Whitaker? This will decline any pending transactions and prevent future access. I thought about the $4,200. That was 3 months of daycare for Leo. That was a family vacation we hadn't taken. That was my blood, sweat, and time. I pressed confirm. The little green toggle slid to the left and turned gray. Status inactive. I wasn't done. I went to the card management tab. I selected the secondary card issued in her name. Freeze card. Report as lost/stolen no. Cancel card. I tapped cancel. The app loaded for a split second. A spinning circle of doom for Darlene. A circle of liberation for me. Card canceled. I locked the phone and let it drop onto the sheet covering my chest. Noelle, Darlene's voice was getting louder, frantic now. Noelle, she ran it again and it said, card invalid, what did you do? Noelle, I brought the phone back to my lips one last time. Mom, I said, and this time, my voice was cold iron. What is happening? Fix it, she screeched. You didn't ask if I was alive, I said. You just asked for the money. What are you talking about? Stop being dramatic and transfer the... I didn't transfer it, I interrupted her. And I never will again. I pressed the red button to end the call. The silence that followed was louder than the siren. Tessa was staring at me. She had heard the tone, if not the words. She saw the change in my eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by something harder, something dangerous. "You okay?" Tessa asked again, her voice gentle. I looked at my hand. The blood was drying. The pain was still there, but it felt distant now. I had just performed surgery on myself, without anesthesia. I had cut out the tumor. "Yeah," I said, letting my head fall back against the pillow as the ambulance turned into the hospital bay. "I am okay. Can you call my husband now?" "Sure thing, sweetie," Tessa said, reaching for the phone. I closed my eyes and listened to the wheels rumbling beneath me. I knew what was coming. The rage, the guilt trips, the flying monkeys. Darlene would not go quietly. She would scream. She would manipulate. She would weaponize the rest of the family against me. But as the ambulance doors flew open and the rush of the ER air hit my face, I felt a grim satisfaction. My mother thought she was dealing with a daughter who desperately wanted to be loved. She didn't know that she had just pushed me too far. She didn't know that while she was worrying about a VIP lounge in an airport, I was lying here rewriting the contract of our relationship. She didn't know that today, for the first time in 9 years, the ATM would learn how to say no. The chaos of the emergency room receded into a dull roar. Separated from me by a thin beige curtain, the nurses had stabilized my ribs with a binder, administered a painkiller that took the jagged edge off my breathing, and left me to wait for the CT scan results. I was alone. For the first time since the crash, I was truly alone. My husband, Ethan, was on his way. I knew he was battling rush-hour traffic, likely gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, terrified by the fragmented information Tessa had given him. But I was not thinking about Ethan. I was not thinking about the phantom ache in my chest or the metallic taste of blood that still lingered on my tongue. I was thinking about the phone in my hand. I unlocked the screen again. The banking app was still open. A digital crime scene I had been living in for nearly a decade without ever dusting for fingerprints. Now, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital, I put on my forensic gloves. It was time for an autopsy. I navigated to the history tab of the secondary checking account, the one I had just severed Darlene from. I scrolled back, past the declined transaction that had sparked her rage in the airport, past the $600 for the spa, past the grocery bills that were never for groceries but for wine and imported cheese. I stopped at the first of the month. There it was. Transfer to D. Whitaker $4,200. I scrolled back to the previous month, the 1st of August. Transfer to D. Whitaker $4,200. July, June, May, April. The repetition was hypnotic. It was rhythmic, like a heartbeat, but it was not pumping life. It was draining it. I tapped on the search icon and filtered by Darlene Whitaker and transfer. The list populated instantly, a long scrolling testament to my own stupidity. I began to do the math in my head, the numbers tumbling over each other. $4,200 a month. That was $50,400 a year. I had been doing this for 9 years. My breath hitched, sending a spike of pain through my fractured ribs, but I ignored it. $453,600. That was the base principal. That was just the allowance. That number did not include the overdrafts. It did not include the emergencies. It did not include the time her car needed a new transmission, or the time she needed a mental health retreat in Sedona, which cost $5,000 for a weekend of breathing exercises and mud baths. I looked at the number in my mind. $500,000. A house, a college fund for my son, a retirement plan. I had bent myself into knots to keep her comfortable, and she still found a way to complain that the draft was bothering her eyes. I clicked into the transaction details for the standard monthly transfer. I'd always labeled it family support in the memo line. A soft, gentle euphemism. But as I studied the breakdown of where that money went the moment it hit her account, because I could see her inflows and outflows on the joint ledger. The euphemism dissolved. $2,100 went straight to the mortgage on her condo in the Arts District. A condo she insisted on keeping because the light was better for her painting, even though she hadn't touched a paintbrush since 2012. $600 went to the premium insurance package for her Lexus. Not a standard policy, but the platinum coverage with zero deductible and roadside concierge, because God forbid Darlene Whitaker ever have to change a tire or wait for a tow truck like a normal human being. $800 went to the Grandview Social Club. I stared at that line item. It was a monthly fee for a place where she drank gin and tonics and complained about how hard her life was to other women who were likely bleeding their own children dry. The remaining $700 was categorized loosely as maintenance, hair, nails, dermatology, supplements that promised eternal youth. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Unrelated to the shock of the accident, this was a different kind of trauma. This was financial abuse. Systematic and prolonged. I closed my eyes and the hospital room vanished. I was 20 years old again. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our old house, the one she sold 6 months later to downsize into the luxury condo. I had just landed my first real job as a junior designer. The salary was modest, but to me, it felt like a fortune. Darlene had made coffee. She never made coffee. She sat across from me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, her hands clasping mine across the table. "Noelle," she had said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "I am so proud of you. You are the strong one. You have always been the strong one." I preened under the praise. I was young, desperate for approval, desperate to be seen as an adult. "I am worried, though," she continued, looking down at her perfectly manicured nails. "With your father gone, the finances are complicated. I don't want to burden you, but the bank suggested that having a linked account would be a safety measure, just a backup, in case of an emergency. You know how forgetful I get with bill dates." "Of course, Mom," 20-year-old Noelle had said, eager to be the savior. "I can help. I will link it. It is just for emergencies, right?" "Just for emergencies," she had promised. "And maybe a little help with the house. Since you are earning now, it is only fair. Isn't it I raised you? I paid for everything for 20 years. Now we are partners." Partners. I opened my eyes and looked at the harsh ceiling tiles of the ER. It was never a partnership. It was a landlord-tenant agreement, but the lease was my guilt, and the rent was my future. Emergency became, "The electric bill is higher than I thought." Then it became, "I need a new dress for the gala." Then it became silence. It became an expectation. If the money was not there by the first of the month at 9 in the morning, I would get a text by 9:15. Not asking, just stating, "The transfer hasn't cleared." She had conditioned me, like a dog. I looked back at the phone. I wasn't just looking at numbers anymore. I was looking at the architecture of a prison. I decided to look closer. If I was going to burn this bridge, I needed to know exactly how much rot was in the wood. I began to scroll through the miscellaneous transactions, from the last 6 months, the ones that triggered the overdraft protection I had just disabled. Most were typical Darlene, high-end department stores, restaurants with $3 signs on Yelp, but then my thumb froze. There was a transaction from 3 weeks ago. September 12th. It was for $3,500. It was a check withdrawal, processed electronically. The recipient was not a store. It was not a utility company. Payee Rook and Halston, LLP? I frowned. The name sounded familiar, but not in a way that brought comfort. It sounded like heavy oak doors and billable hours that cost more than my car payment. Why was my mother paying a law firm $3,500 using my money? Darlene did not have legal trouble. She didn't drive fast enough to get tickets, and she certainly didn't have any business dealings that required counsel. I minimized the banking app and opened a browser window. I typed Rook and Halston LLP into the search bar. My signal was weak in the hospital interior, the blue bar crawling agonizingly slow across the top of the screen, Finally, the page loaded. Rook and Halston Premier Estate Planning, Conservatorship, and Asset Protection. I stared at the words. Estate planning. Darlene had no estate. She had debt and a condo she could barely afford without my subsidy. I scrolled down to the Our Team section. I saw a face that made my stomach turn, though I had never met the man. Mason Rook, senior partner. His bio boasted of his expertise in complex family asset restructuring and adult guardianship litigation. Guardianship. The word hung in my mind, heavy and cold. Why would a healthy, 55-year-old woman need a consultation about guardianship? I went back to the banking app. I tapped on the check image to view the back. It was endorsed by Mason Rook. The memo line on the digital check image was filled out in my mother's looping, dramatic handwriting. Consultation, N.H. Matter, N.H. Noel Harmon. The air in the room seemed to vanish. My lungs, already struggling against the bruised ribs, seized up. She wasn't using my money to defend herself. She was using my money to build a case against me. I looked at the date again. 3 weeks ago, that was right after I had told her that Ethan and I were thinking about moving to a bigger house, implying that money might be tighter in the future. I had mentioned, tentatively, that we might need to review the monthly transfer. She hadn't argued then. She had just gone quiet. And then she had written a check to a lawyer who specialized in taking control of people's lives. A cold clarity washed over me, sharper than the pain. This wasn't just greed. Greed is simple. Greed is a child stealing a cookie. This was predatory. This was strategic. She was not just spending my money. She was preparing to seize the source. If she could prove I was incompetent or unstable, perhaps using the stress of a new job, or maybe even capitalizing on a medical emergency like a car accident, she could petition for control. God, I whispered, the word escaping my lips as a shudder. My phone buzzed, startling me so badly I almost dropped it. A text message notification slid down from the top of the screen. It was from Ethan. I am parking now. I am running to the entrance. Hang on. Baby, I love you. I stared at his words. Pure, unfiltered love. Then another text slid down, right below his. From Mom. You are making a mistake. Mason says we need to talk before you do anything rash. Unfreeze the card. We are coming to the hospital. She wasn't coming alone. She was bringing the shark. I looked at the transaction history one last time. The $3,500 for the lawyer. The $4,200 for the lifestyle. The 9 years of theft. They weren't coming to see if I was okay. They were coming because the ATM had malfunctioned, and they were bringing a crowbar to pry it open. I gripped the phone tightly. My hand was shaking. But not from fear anymore. It was shaking with the sheer, overwhelming force of realization. I had spent 9 years thinking I was a dutiful daughter helping a struggling mother. I had been wrong. I was a host organism, and she was the parasite. And now that the host was trying to detach, the parasite was trying to paralyze the host. I swiped the notification away. I did not reply. Instead, I opened my contacts. I didn't call Ethan. He was already here. He was the muscle. I needed the brain. I needed the shield. I scrolled past Mom. I scrolled past home. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in 2 years. Not because I didn't love him, but because Darlene had made it so difficult to maintain the connection. She had poisoned the well, telling me he was cold, unfeeling, that he blamed me for things I hadn't done. Grandpa Miles. I didn't press the call button yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to secure the perimeter before I called in the heavy artillery. I looked at the time. It was 5:45. The consultation with Rook and Halston had cost $3,500. That bought a lot of strategy. That bought a plan. They had a head start, but they didn't know that I had the receipt. I took a screenshot of the check to Rook and Halston. I took screenshots of the last 12 months of transfers. I took a screenshot of the overdraft settings. I uploaded them all to a hidden cloud folder Ethan and I shared for tax documents, a folder Darlene didn't know existed. You wanna matter. I whispered to the empty room. You got one. The curtain rustled. I looked up, expecting Ethan. It was a nurse I hadn't seen yet. She looked tired but kind. Mrs. Harmon. We are ready for your CT scan now. Can you move? Yes, I said. I sat up. The pain was blinding, white stars dancing in my vision as my ribs protested the movement. But I gritted my teeth and swung my legs over the side of the bed. I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a witness, and I needed to make sure I was conscious, clear-headed, and ready for war when I came back from that scan. Because Darlene Whitaker was coming, and she wasn't bringing flowers. She was bringing a lawsuit wrapped in a mother's concern. I slid my feet into my slippers and stood up. I swayed slightly, but I didn't fall. Let's go, I told the nurse. I need to get this done fast. I have visitors coming. Family, the nurse asked, offering me a steadying arm. I looked at my phone, dark in my hand now. No, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. Creditors. The nurse left the room to prepare the CT scanner, leaving the door slightly ajar. The sounds of the hospital filtered in the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum, the distant rhythmic beeping of cardiac monitors, the low murmur of conversations I could not distinguish. I was alone with my phone. I held it with my good hand, the left one. My right hand, the one with the IV, throbbed in time with my heartbeat. The screen was the only source of light in my immediate vicinity, casting a pale, ghostly glow on the hospital sheets. I looked at the banking app again. The interface was designed to be user-friendly, clean, and intuitive. It was blue and white, colors chosen by psychologists to evoke trust and stability. But to me, it looked like a cage I had built for myself, bar by digital bar. I navigated away from the transaction history where I had seen the check for the lawyer. Seeing that evidence had been the shock. This next part was the surgery. I went to the main menu. My thumb hovered over the button labeled Transfer Funds. It would be so easy. That was how the trap worked. It was designed for compliance. Type in 4,200. Select Primary Checking. Select Mom. Hit Send. If I did that, the phone calls would stop. Darlene would get her VIP access. She would board her flight to Milan. She would drink her champagne. For another 30 days, there would be peace. But it would be the peace of the graveyard. I stared at that transfer button. It was not just a function. It was a submission. It was an admission that her wants were more important than my needs, that her comfort was worth more than my safety. Sending that money now, after she had ignored my injury to demand cash, would be the final signature on my own soul's eviction notice. I moved my thumb. I did not press transfer. I tapped the gear icon in the top right corner. Account settings. I scrolled past the profile options. I scrolled past the statement preferences. I found the section I needed. The section I had set up when I was 20, full of naive hope and a desperate need to be a good daughter. Linked accounts and authorized users. I tapped it. The screen loaded, a small spinning circle that seemed to take an eternity. Then, the list appeared. There was only one name on the list, Darlene Whitaker. Next to her name was a status indicator. It was a small, bright green dot. The word next to it read, active. That green dot mocked me. Green was supposed to mean go. It was supposed to mean healthy, operational, safe. But this green dot meant open. It meant my financial veins were cut wide open. And she had the straw. I tapped on her name. A new menu slid up from the bottom of the screen. Edit permissions. Adjust limits. Remove user. I took a breath. The air in the room was cold, filtered and sterile. But my face felt hot. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs. A frantic drumbeat of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment I stopped being a daughter and started being a firewall. I selected Remove User. The app paused. It wanted to be sure. A warning box popped up in the center of the screen. The text bold and black. Are you sure you want to revoke authorization for Darlene Whitaker? This will immediately disable all linked cards and cancel overdraft protection for this user. Any pending transactions initiated by this user may be declined. Cancel. Confirm. My thumb hovered over the word confirm. For a split second, I froze. The conditioning kicked in. I heard her voice in my head. Not the shrieking voice from the phone call, but the voice from my childhood. The voice that told me I was selfish if I kept a toy she wanted to give to a cousin. The voice that told me I was difficult if I didn't want to wear the dress she picked out. The voice that said, "After everything I have done for you, if I press this button," I was declaring war. I was stranding her at an airport. I was humiliating her in front of strangers. Then, I looked at the bandage on my arm. I looked at the dark bruise forming on my wrist. I thought about the check for the lawyer. She was already at war with me. She had been at war with me for weeks, maybe years. I had just been the only one not fighting back. I thought about my son, Leo. If I kept bleeding money like this, what would be left for him? Would I be able to pay for his college? Or would I have to tell him he couldn't go because Grandma needed a villa in Tuscany? I was not just protecting my money. I was protecting his future. "No more," I whispered. I pressed confirm. The screen flashed. The little spinning circle returned. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The menu refreshed. The name Darlene Whitaker was still there. But the status had changed. The green dot was gone. In its place was a gray circle. Hollow, empty, status inactive, authorization revoked. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. It came out as a shuddering gasp. The relief was instantaneous, physical. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Lighter than the broken ribs, but far more suffocating. But I was not done. Darlene was resourceful. She knew my birthday. She knew my social security number. She knew my mother's maiden name because it was her name. If I just cut the line, she would try to splice it back together. She would call the bank, pretending to be me. She had done it before to fix errors she claimed I made. I had to scorch the earth. I went back to the main settings, Security Center. I selected cards. I found the secondary debit card, the one she carried in her wallet, the one currently sitting on a counter in the Sapphire Lounge. I tapped lock card. Reason for locking, I typed, theft. I deleted it. No, that was emotional. I needed to be precise. I typed unauthorized usage risk. I confirmed the lock. The image of the card on the screen turned gray, a padlock icon appearing over the numbers. Next, I went to transaction limits. Her card had a daily spending limit of $5,000. I had set it that high 5 years ago when she claimed she needed to buy furniture for the condo and would pay me back. She never did. I tapped the number. I backspaced over the 5, the 0, the 0, the 0. I entered $0. I saved the setting. Then, the most important step, login security. I changed my password. It had been Leo 2019, easy to guess. I changed it to a random string of characters I saw on the serial number of the medical monitor next to me, XJ9-44-K2. She would never guess that. I enabled two-factor authentication. Require a code for every login. Yes. Trusted devices. I saw her iPad listed. I saw her iPhone listed. I tapped remove on both. Revoke access. This will force the user to log out immediately. Yes. Yes. The digital door slammed shut. Bolt after bolt sliding into place, I stared at the screen. The time was 5:52 in the afternoon. In less than 7 minutes, I had undone 9 years of financial entanglement. Mrs. Harmon. I looked up. Tessa, the EMT, who had brought me in, was standing in the doorway. She wasn't my nurse, but she had stayed behind to finish her report and check on me. She had seen the start of the call. She had seen my face when my mother asked for money instead of my life. "Tessa," I said. My voice was raspy. "Can you help me with something? My hands are shaking too much to dial." Tessa stepped into the room, her expression soft but alert. "Of course. Who do you need to call? Your husband is almost at the front desk." "Not him," I said. "I need to call the bank. The fraud hotline. It is on the back of my card." I fumbled to get my wallet out of my purse, which had been placed on the bedside table. Tessa moved quickly, helping me unzip the bag. She handed me my primary card. I can hold the phone for you, she offered. Please, I said. Speakerphone. She dialed the number. The automated voice answered. Welcome to Chase. For English. Press 1. Tessa navigated the menu for me, her eyes never leaving my face. She didn't ask questions. She just helped. Please hold for the next available representative, the machine said. We waited. The hold music was a terrible, tinny jazz loop. You are doing the right thing, Tessa said quietly. She didn't know the whole story, but she knew enough. She had seen the blood. She had heard the request for $4,000. I know, I said. This is Agent Michael, ID number 442. How can I help you today? A voice cut through the music. Hello, I said, leaning toward the phone in Tessa's hand. My name is Noelle Harmon. I am calling to place a high-security alert on my accounts. Okay, Mrs. Harmon, I can help with that. Has your card been stolen? No, I said, but I have reason to believe a family member will attempt to access my funds or impersonate me to reverse changes I have just made. There was a pause on the line. Bank agents were used to stolen wallets, not family wars. I see, Agent Michael said, his tone shifting to something more serious. Do you want to set a verbal password? Yes, I said. And I want you to put a specific note on the file. Go ahead. I took a deep breath. I needed to use the words that Mason Rook would understand if he tried to bully a bank teller later. Please note, risk of coercion. Note that I am currently hospitalized and any request to restore access to Darlene Whitaker or authorize large transfers should be treated as potentially made under duress. No changes are to be made without voice verification and the verbal password. I am typing that in now, Michael said. I could hear the click-clack of his keyboard. It was the sound of a fortress being built. And the verbal password. I looked at Tessa. She nodded encouragingly. Shattered, I said. Shattered? Okay. Is there anything else? No, that is all. Thank you. Tessa ended the call. She looked at me with a new kind of respect. Coercion, she repeated. That is a heavy word. It is the right word, I said. I sank back into the pillows. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. My ribs felt like they were wrapped in barbed wire, but my mind was clear. For 9 years, I had been the safety net. I had been the foundation. When Darlene fell, she landed on me. When she wanted to reach for something higher, she stood on my shoulders. I looked at the phone one last time. The screen was dark. The connection was severed. In the airport lounge, Darlene was probably screaming at a poor waitress right now. She was probably trying to log into her iPad, only to see the login screen bounce back. She was probably realizing, with a dawning horror, that the magic money tap had run dry. She would fall, without me to pay the mortgage. The condo would be at risk, without me to pay the credit card. The interest rates would spike, without me, the facade of her wealthy. Carefree life would crumble like wet sand. A pang of guilt tried to rise up in my throat, that old trained reflex. You are hurting your mother. I swallowed it down. I crushed it. I wasn't hurting her. I was just stepping out of the way. I am not pulling her up anymore, I whispered to the ceiling. The words meant only for myself. I am just stopping being the floor she stands on. The door opened wider. The nurse returned. We are ready for you now. Noelle, she said cheerfully. I am ready too, I said, and I was. I was ready for the scan. I was ready for the diagnosis, and I was ready for the fight that was walking through the hospital doors right now. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't entering the ring with one hand tied behind my back. I had cut the rope. The orderly wheeled me into room 304. A private observation suite at the end of the hallway. The wheels of the gurney squeaked rhythmically, a high-pitched sound that grated against my headache. But I did not complain. I needed the isolation. I needed the silence. They shifted me from the transport gurney to the hospital bed. The movement was a fresh agony, a sharp reminder that my ribs were not merely bruised but fractured. I grit my teeth. letting a hiss of air escape through my nose. But I did not cry out. Crying was a waste of energy, and I had no energy left to spare. "I will get you settled, honey," the nurse said. Her name tag read Marisol, and she was the charge nurse for the night shift. She was a woman in her 50s with compassionate eyes, but a demeanor that suggested she had seen everything from miracles to murders in this ward. She moved with efficient, practiced grace, adjusting the IV line and checking the monitor that displayed my heart rate in jagged green peaks. "Thank you, Marisol," I said. My voice was clearer now. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. The pain was still there, a constant dull roar in my side, but my mind felt like a scalpel clean, sharp, and sterilized. "Dr. Evans will be in shortly to review the CT scan," Marisol said, pulling the thin hospital blanket up to my chin. "In the meantime, you need to rest. Your blood pressure is a little high." "It is high because I'm expecting visitors," I said. Marisol paused, her hand hovering over the call button. She looked at me, really looked at me. "Husband." "My mother," I corrected her. "And her lawyer." Marisol's eyebrows shot up. "Her lawyer?" "At 6 o'clock in the evening in a trauma ward." "My mother is a very particular woman," I said. I carefully adjusted my position, wincing as the movement pulled at the tape on my wrist. "Marisol, I need to ask you a favor, a medical favor." "Go ahead." "I need you to create an environment that minimizes stress," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a contract lawyer. "If my blood pressure spikes, it puts me at risk for internal bleeding. Correct?" "Technically, yes." She nodded slowly, sensing where I was going. "Then I need you to treat my room like a restricted zone," I said. "I want a sign on the door. No visitors without clearance. I want the blinds drawn. I want the lights dimmed. I want it to look like I am barely holding on." Marisol studied my face. She saw the bruising on my temple, the split lip, and the desperate intensity in my eyes. She didn't ask for the family history. She didn't ask why a daughter would want to hide from her mother. She just nodded. "I can do that," she said firmly. "Standard protocol for head trauma observation. Low stimulation environment." "Thank you," I breathed. "And Marisol, if they try to force their way in, if they raise their voices or try to touch me, I will call security," she finished for me. "Not just security," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "Call the hospital's legal compliance officer. Tell them there is a risk of patient coercion regarding financial instruments. Use those words." Marisol's expression hardened. She understood. "I will be right at the station outside your door. No one gets in unless you say so, or unless they have a warrant." She moved to the window and pulled the heavy blackout curtains shut, plunging the room into a twilight gloom. She dimmed the overhead lights until the only illumination came from the glowing screen of the cardiac monitor and the strip of light under the hallway door. "Rest now," she whispered, and slipped out of the room. The room was quiet. Perfect. I reached for my purse, which sat on the bedside table. My movements were slow, deliberate. I took out my phone. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb of glass over the display, but it still worked. I did not open the banking app this time. That work was done. The bridges were burned. Now, I was digging the moat. I opened the voice memo app. I tested it first. Testing, 1, 2. The waveform on the screen jumped in response to my whisper. Good. I set the phone on the bedside table, face down, with the microphone pointing toward the chair where a visitor would sit. I covered it partially with a box of tissues, leaving just enough space for the sound to travel. I was not doing this to entrap an innocent person. I was doing this because I knew exactly who was coming. I knew Mason Rook would not scream. He was a professional. He would threaten me in a low, reasonable voice. He would use big words and calm tones to strip me of my rights. I needed that on tape. I lay back against the pillows and closed my eyes for a moment, visualizing the layout. The room was a stage. I was the prop. The audience was about to arrive, but first, the real priorities. I opened my messaging app. I ignored the 12 unread messages from Mom and the 4 from Kendra. I selected the thread with Ethan. I am in room 304. I typed, "Do not come up yet. Stay in the lobby. I need you to handle the babysitter first." I waited. 3 seconds later, the reply bubbles appeared. "I am here. I am in the lobby. I called the sitter. Leo is eating mac and cheese. He is fine. He doesn't know anything happened. Noelle. Let me come up. I need to see you." Relief washed over me. So potent it almost made me dizzy. Leo was safe. He was eating mac and cheese. He was watching cartoons, completely oblivious to the fact that his grandmother was currently hunting his mother like a wounded animal. "Stay there." I typed back. "Mom is coming. She is bringing a lawyer. If you are here, she will play the victim. She will make a scene in the hallway. I need her to come into the room. I need her to feel like she is in control. A lawyer." Ethan replied, "What the hell?" "Noelle." I cut her off. I typed, "I cut everything off. She is desperate. Trust me. Just wait until I text you the word, now." There was a long pause. I could imagine Ethan pacing the lobby floor, running a hand through his hair, torn between his instinct to protect me and his trust in my judgment. "Okay," he finally replied, "but I am 5 floors down. If anything happens, I have security." I lied. I didn't have them yet. I had Marisol. And I had a plan. I put the phone down for a second, breathing through a spasm of pain in my side. I needed to send one more message. The bait. I opened the thread with Darlene Whitaker. The last message from her was from 20 minutes ago. "We are 10 minutes away. Do not do anything stupid." I typed slowly, my thumb hovering over the letters. I needed to sound weak. I needed to sound like the daughter she had dominated for 3 decades. I needed to sound like the victim she expected to find. "I cannot transfer the money." I typed, "I am in the emergency room. It hurts." That was it. No explanations. No mention of the revoked access. Just a plea of incapacity. I hit send. The response was immediate. The 3 dots appeared instantly, indicating she had the chat open and was staring at it. "We are taking the elevator up," she wrote back. She didn't ask where it hurt. She didn't ask what the doctor said. She just confirmed her arrival. I put the phone back in its hiding spot under the tissues. I checked the recording app one last time. The red timer was counting up. 0 hours, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. I lay back and adjusted the nasal cannula, the plastic tubing that delivered oxygen to my nose. I didn't strictly need it. My oxygen saturation was 98%. But Marisol had left it on, and it added to the visual. I let my hand fall limp over the side of the bed. I relaxed my facial muscles, letting my mouth hang slightly open, letting my eyelids droop. I practiced my breathing, shallow, rugged, the breathing of a woman who was too exhausted to fight. If Darlene walked in and saw me sitting up, alert and angry, she would put on her public face. She would be the concerned mother. She would perform for the nurses. She would say, "Oh, my poor darling," and then whisper threats in my ear when no one was looking. But if she saw me broken, if she saw me weak, she would drop the mask. She would see an opportunity. She would think the lion was asleep, and she could steal the meat right out of its jaws. I heard the elevator ding down the hall. My heart rate monitor picked up speed. Beep, beep, beep. I closed my eyes, but I kept my ears strained. I heard the click-clack of heels, hard, fast steps, not the soft shuffle of visitors, the march of entitlement. I heard a man's voice, low and smooth. "It is just a formality. Darlene, we will get the signature and handle the bank in the morning. I need it handled tonight." "Mason," my mother's voice hissed. "That little ungrateful brat shut off the overdraft. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a card declined in front of the Sapphire Club staff?" They were closer now, just outside the nurses' station. "Ma'am, you cannot go in there," Marisol's voice rang out, authoritative and firm. "That is a restricted room." "I am her mother," Darlene announced. The volume of her voice suggested that this title should open bank vaults and prison cells alike. "And this is our family attorney. We have urgent medical decisions to discuss." She is in a delicate state, Marisol countered. High stress could cause complications. I have strict orders. Orders from whom? Mason Rook asked. His voice was polite, but it carried the weight of a threat. Mrs. Whitaker has medical power of attorney. Unless you want to obstruct a legal guardian, I suggest you step aside. I lay perfectly still. They were lying. She did not have medical power of attorney. Ethan did, but they were banking on the nurse being intimidated. They were banking on the confusion of the moment. I need to check the file, Marisol said. She was stalling. Good girl. Check whatever you want, Darlene snapped. But I'm going in to see my daughter. She texted me. She is expecting me. I heard the heavy door of my room push open. Light from the hallway spilled in, cutting across the dimness like a searchlight. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I kept my breathing shallow. My eyes closed to mere slits. Jesus, Kendra's voice whispered. My sister was there too. Of course she was. She was the bag carrier. It is dark in here. Is she asleep? She is probably sedated, Mason said. He stepped into the room. I could smell his cologne sandalwood and expensive scotch. It was a smell that reeked of billable hours. Noelle. Darlene's voice was sharp. She wasn't whispering. She walked right up to the bed. I let out a low moan, turning my head slightly away from her, as if the sound of her voice caused me physical pain, which, in a way, it did. Wake up, Darlene said. She reached out and grabbed my shoulder. Her fingers dug in, right near the collarbone. It wasn't a caress. It was a shake. Ma'am, Marisol appeared in the doorway behind them. Do not touch the patient. She is fine. Darlene dismissed the nurse without looking back. She is just being dramatic. She has always been dramatic. Noelle, open your eyes. Mason is here. We have papers for you to sign. I opened my eyes slowly, fluttering the lids as if they were made of lead. I looked at Darlene. She was wearing her traveling coat, a beige cashmere trench that cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfectly coiffed. Her makeup was flawless. There was not a single tear track on her cheek. Mom, I rasped. Finally, she huffed. Look at this mess. You have caused a complete disaster. Noelle, do you know I missed my flight? I have to fly standby tomorrow morning. It is unacceptable. I was in a crash, I whispered. And you survived, she said, looking at the monitor. Obviously, but my credit rating might not. Now, sit up. Mason needs you to authorize the reinstatement of the account linkage immediately. Mason Rook stepped into my line of sight. He was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He opened a leather folder and pulled out a document. Hello, Noelle, he said smoothly. I am sorry to see you like this. We just want to help you manage things while you are incapacitated. This form just gives your mother temporary authority to handle your banking until you are back on your feet. Standard procedure. He held a pen out to me. I looked at the pen. I looked at the document. Even in the dim light, I could see the header. General Durable Power of Attorney. It wasn't temporary. It was total. I can't, I mumbled, letting my hand tremble. You can, Darlene hissed. She grabbed my hand, my right hand, the one with the IV, and tried to force the pen into my fingers. Pain shot up my arm, hot and vicious. Mom, you're hurting me, I said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. Then sign it, she whispered furiously, leaning down so her face was inches from mine. Sign the paper, transfer the funds, and stop this nonsense. You owe me this, Noelle. After everything I sacrificed for you, you do not get to shut me out just because you bumped your head. I looked past her shoulder. Marisol was standing in the doorway, her hand on her radio. She looked furious. I caught Marisol's eye. I gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. Do it. Marisol lifted her radio to her lips. Security to room 304. Urgent. We have a code gray. Visitors are physically harassing a patient. Darlene froze. She looked back at the nurse. What did you say? I said security is coming, Marisol said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. And I am calling the legal department. You just assaulted a patient in my view. I was comforting her, Darlene shrieked, dropping my hand as if it were on fire. I heard you, Marisol said, and I think the patient heard you too. I turned my head back to Mason Rook. The smooth lawyer facade was cracking. He looked from the nurse to Darlene, and then to me. He realized, perhaps a second too late, that the room was too dark, the situation too staged. He looked at the bedside table. He saw the box of tissues. He saw the corner of my phone sticking out beneath it. His eyes narrowed. "Noelle," he said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. "What are you doing?" I stopped pretending. I stopped the shallow breathing. I stopped the trembling. I pushed myself up against the pillows, ignoring the pain in my ribs because the fire in my gut was hotter. I looked him straight in the eye. "I am conducting a consultation," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And you just gave me all the evidence I need." The sound of heavy boots running down the hallway echoed outside. Security was here. The trap had snapped shut, and they were all inside. The security guards had escorted Darlene, Kendra, and Mason Rook out of the room, but not out of the hospital. They were in the lobby now, likely regrouping, strategizing, and undoubtedly fuming. The silence in my room was heavy, but it was not peaceful. It was the silence of a trench between mortar rounds. I picked up my phone. The screen was a battlefield of notifications. While they were physically present in the room, they had been restrained by the presence of Marisol and the guards. But digital space has no witnesses. Or so they thought. The messages had been piling up since I cut the financial cord. A chronological record of Darlene's descent from annoyance to fury to desperation. I opened the thread. It was a masterclass in narcissism. 5:48 p.m. Mom. The card was declined again. "This is humiliating. Fix it immediately." 5:51 p.m. Mom, Noelle. "Are you reading this? The manager is holding my luggage. He says if the deposit doesn't clear. I can't even leave my bags here while I sort this out. You are making a scene for me." 5:55 p.m. Mom, 5 minutes. If the money isn't in the account in 5 minutes. "I am coming to that hospital, and I am not coming to hold your hand." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. It hurt my ribs, but the absurdity was too rich to ignore. "You are making a scene for me." I was the one bleeding in a hospital bed. But the real tragedy, in Darlene's world, was that her Louis Vuitton suitcase was being held hostage by a concierge. Then, the messages from Kendra started, my younger sister, the eternal peacekeeper who kept the peace by handing Darlene whatever weapon she wanted. 6:02 p.m. Kendra. "Why are you doing this? Mom is crying. She says you cut her off. Just transfer the money. Noelle, don't be selfish." 6:05 p.m. Kendra. "She is really stressed. Noelle, her blood pressure is up. You know she gets migraines. Just fix it and we can talk later." Selfish. That was the word. It was the Whitaker family safe word. If you ever tried to set a boundary, you were selfish. If you ever said no, you were selfish. If you wanted to keep the money you earned to feed your own child instead of funding your mother's European vacation, you were selfish. I looked at the timestamps. These messages were sent while they were in the elevator coming up to my room. They were typing these threats with one hand while adjusting their concerned family masks with the other. My phone buzzed again in my hand. It wasn't a text. It was a call. Unknown number. I stared at it. I knew who it was. The area code was local, but the prefix was from the financial district downtown. I answered, but I didn't speak. I pressed the mute button immediately. "Hello, Mrs. Harmon." The voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with false concern. It was the voice of a man who charged $600 an hour to destroy families. It was Mason Rook. He must have stepped away from Darlene in the lobby to make this call, thinking he could charm or intimidate me without an audience. "Mrs. Harmon, this is Mason Rook. I believe we met briefly upstairs. Though the situation was chaotic, I represent your mother, Darlene Whitaker, I remained silent. The mute button was my shield. Let him talk. Every word was data. I am calling because I think there has been a misunderstanding, he continued, his tone shifting to one of reasonable negotiation. Your mother is very worried about your mental state. The crash was severe. Head trauma can cause erratic behavior, paranoia, impulsivity. He paused, waiting for me to deny it. When I didn't, he took my silence as weakness. We are concerned that in your confused state, you have made decisions regarding your finances that you do not fully understand. Revoking access, freezing assets, these are drastic measures. Noelle, they signal a lack of capacity. Capacity. There it was again, the legal buzzword, the key to the lock. We are preparing an emergency motion, Rook said, his voice dropping a register, becoming confidential. To appoint a temporary guardian for your estate, just until you are well. We don't want to do this. Noelle, it is a public record. It is messy. But if you don't unlock the accounts voluntarily, we will have to ask a judge to do it for us, for your own protection. My hand tightened around the phone until the plastic case creaked. For your own protection. It was the ultimate gaslight. He was threatening to strip me of my autonomy, to take away my rights to my own money, my own life, and he was wrapping it in the language of care. Think about it, Rook said. We are downstairs. We can resolve this in 5 minutes. Just text your mother the password to the account, or authorize the transfer, then we can all go home. You don't want a court battle. Noelle, not with a newborn baby at home. My son was 3. He wasn't a newborn. They didn't even know how old he was. I will give you 10 minutes, Rook said. Do the right thing. He hung up. I lowered the phone. The screen went black. The silence in the room felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the echo of his threat. They weren't just angry about the money. They were terrified. They realized that without my funding, their house of cards would collapse, and like drowning people, they were ready to climb on top of me to keep their heads above water. Even if it meant holding me under, a guardianship, a conservatorship, they wanted to do to me what they did to Britney Spears. They wanted to declare me incompetent so they could legally siphon my wealth without me being able to say a word. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was the chill of absolute clarity. They had shown their hand. They had played their ace. But they didn't know I was holding a joker. I unlocked my phone again. I didn't text Darlene. I didn't text Kendra. I opened the contact for Grandpa Miles. I hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. Not since the Thanksgiving where Darlene had thrown a wine glass at him because he suggested she get a job. She had forbidden me from seeing him, telling me he was toxic, that he hated us, like a fool. I had obeyed. I had let her isolate me. But I remembered something from years ago, when my father died, before the madness truly began. Grandpa Miles had taken me aside. I was 22. He had handed me a thick envelope. Just in case, he had said. Your mother, she grieves differently. She consumes. If she ever tries to consume you, use this. I had signed the papers inside that envelope. I had notarized them, and then I had filed them away in a safety deposit box I hadn't opened in a decade. But Grandpa Miles was meticulous. He would have kept his copy. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. Noelle. His voice was gruff. Older than I remembered, but steady. It sounded like oak trees and old leather. It sounded like safety. Grandpa, I said. My voice broke. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. Grandpa, I need help. Where are you? He asked immediately. No. How have you been? No. Why are you calling now? Just action. St. Jude's Hospital, room 304. I was in a car accident. Are you hurt bad? Broken ribs, concussion. But that's not the worst part. Is it Darlene? He asked. He knew. Of course he knew. She is here, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. With a lawyer, Mason Rook. They are threatening a guardianship. They say I am incompetent. They want control of the accounts. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, dangerous silence. "Grandpa, I am putting my boots on," he said. "I am 20 minutes away. Grandpa, they have papers. They have a lawyer. They are going to a judge." "Let them," Miles said. "I have papers too. Do you remember what you signed in 2015? The power of attorney. The springing power of attorney," he corrected. "And the advance directive, it predates anything they have. And it specifically excludes Darlene Whitaker from any decision-making capacity regarding your health or your assets." I let out a sob of relief. I had forgotten the details. I had just signed what he told me to sign because I trusted him. "Does it still work?" I asked. "It works," he said. "It triggers the moment you are incapacitated, or the moment you declare yourself to be under duress. Did you tell anyone you were under duress?" "I told the bank," I said, "and I told the nurse." "Good girl," he said. "You sit tight. Don't sign anything. Don't speak to them. If they come back in, you tell them to wait for your legal representative." "You?" "Me," he said. "And I am bringing the cavalry." "Grandpa," I whispered. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Just hold the line. Noelle, the cavalry is coming." The line went dead. I put the phone down. My hands were still shaking, but the panic was gone. I looked at the door. Darlene and Mason thought they were the predators. They thought I was a wounded gazelle separated from the herd. They thought they could circle me, bite me, and drag me down. They didn't know that the herd was coming back, and the herd was led by an old bull who had been waiting 10 years for this fight. I lay back and closed my eyes. 5 minutes. Darlene had said, 10 minutes. Mason had said, I checked the time. It was 6:15. I had time. I waited. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Darlene. "Mom, time is up. We are coming back up. Mason has the papers ready. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't reply. I just watched the door. Let them come. Let them bring their papers and their threats and their fake concern. Let them walk right into the trap. Because when they opened that door, they weren't going to find a helpless daughter. They were going to find a woman who had just remembered who she was. And behind that woman, the sound of heavy boots was getting closer. The hallway outside room 304 ceased to be a place of healing and transformed into a battleground. I heard them before I saw them. It was a specific acoustic signature I had spent 30 years learning to dread, the sharp, authoritative staccato of Darlene Whitaker's designer heels striking the linoleum floor. It was a rhythm that demanded attention, a percussion of entitlement that echoed off the sterile walls. "I do not care what your little clipboard says." My mother's voice carried through the heavy wood of the door, muffled but unmistakable. "I am her mother. She is in a state of shock. She needs me. Ma'am, I have told you. The patient is under strict observation." Marisol's voice countered, firm but straining against the onslaught. "You cannot just barge in there with a posse." "Posse." It was Mason Rook's voice now, smooth like oil slicking over asphalt. "We are her legal counsel and her immediate family. Denial of access to a client in distress is a serious liability. Nurse, I would hate to have to note your name in a deposition regarding patient isolation." It was the classic pincer movement. Darlene applied the emotional pressure, and Mason applied the legal threat. Against a tired night shift nurse, it was usually a winning strategy. I lay perfectly still. I adjusted the nasal cannula, ensuring it looked necessary. I let my eyelids droop until the room became a blur of shadows. My right hand, the one with the IV, lay limp on top of the white sheet. My left hand was hidden beneath the blanket, clutching my phone. The voice memo app was running. The red timer was ticking. The door handle turned. It wasn't a gentle opening. It was a breach. The door swung inward, and the light from the hallway sliced through the gloom of my room. 3 silhouettes stepped into the frame. Darlene entered first. She was not carrying flowers. She was not holding a teddy bear. She was clutching her oversized handbag to her chest like a shield. Her face was a mask of frantic irritation, her eyes scanning the room not to see if I was alive, but to see if I was pliable. Behind her came Kendra, my sister. She looked terrified, her eyes darting around the room, but she was holding a tablet computer with both hands, her fingers already dancing over the screen. She was the technician for this heist. And finally, Mason Rook. He closed the door behind them, shutting out Marisol and the rest of the world. He carried a sleek leather briefcase. He didn't look like a visitor. He looked like an executioner who had arrived to read the final warrant. "Oh, look at her," Darlene whispered, her voice dripping with theatrical pity that barely concealed her disgust. "She looks terrible. Noelle, can you hear me?" I let out a soft, incoherent groan and turned my head slightly on the pillow. "She is out of it," Kendra whispered, stepping closer. The blue light of the tablet illuminated her face, making her look ghastly. "Mom, maybe we should wait. She doesn't even know we are here." "We do not have time to wait," Darlene snapped, her whisper harsh and sibilant. "The hotel in Milan just emailed me about the reservation cancellation. Mason, wake her up." Mason Rook approached the bed. He stood over me, a towering figure in a three-piece suit that cost more than my annual health insurance premiums. He placed his briefcase on the rolling tray table and snapped the latches open. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. "Mrs. Harmon," he said, his voice pitched loud, designed to cut through a fog that didn't exist. "Noelle, I need you to focus." I fluttered my eyes open. I looked at him, letting my gaze drift unfocused for a moment before sharpening just enough to register recognition. "Who?" I croaked. "It is Mason Rook. Noelle, your mother's attorney. We met earlier. Do you remember?" "My head?" I whispered. "Exactly," Mason said, nodding to Darlene as if I had just confirmed his hypothesis. "She is confused, disoriented, typical post-concussive symptoms. This creates a vacuum of authority. Darlene, we need to fill it before the bank freezes everything completely." He pulled a document from his briefcase. It was thick, stapled at the top, and flagged with yellow sticky notes where signatures were required. "Noelle," Mason said, leaning down, "listen to me carefully. Because of your accident, the bank has flagged your accounts for suspicious activity. They think you are compromised, to protect your assets, and to make sure your bills get paid while you are in the hospital. We need to set up a temporary override structure." "Overrides," I mumbled. "It is just a safety measure," Darlene interjected, stepping up to the other side of the bed. She loomed over me, her perfume a heavy, cloying floral scent, filling my nose and making me genuinely nauseous. "You are not thinking clearly. Noelle, you canceled the cards. You cut off the overdraft. You are going to ruin your credit score. We are just here to fix the mess you made." She reached out and took my right hand. Her fingers were cold. She didn't hold my hand to comfort me. She gripped my wrist. She was checking the mobility of my arm. "Kendra, bring the tablet," Darlene ordered. Kendra stepped forward. She held the screen up. It was logged into my bank's mobile interface. I could see the dashboard. I could see the grayed-out, "Mom, emergency account." "We just need to reauthorize," Kendra said, her voice trembling. "I have it set up. It just needs biometric confirmation or a passcode. Since you changed the password, we need the fingerprint." My heart hammered against my ribs. They had brought a digital drill to crack the safe. They intended to use my own thumb, attached to my injured body, to rob me while I lay in a hospital bed. "I don't want to," I whispered, pulling my hand back slightly. Darlene tightened her grip. Her nails dug into the soft flesh of my inner wrist. "Stop acting like a child," Darlene hissed. The mask of the concerned mother slipped, revealing the desperate addict beneath, addicted to status, addicted to my money. "You are hurting the family. Noelle, you are being spiteful. Now, put your thumb on the sensor." "It is for your own good, Noelle," Mason added, his voice dropping to a soothing, hypnotic drone. "We call this a protective conservatorship clause. If you cannot manage your affairs, the law allows your next of kin to step in. We are just fast-tracking it to save you the legal fees." I didn't hire you, I said, putting a little more strength into my voice. You didn't have to. Mason smiled, a shark baring its teeth. He held up the paper document. You already signed the preliminary retainer years ago. Do you remember when you set up the joint account? He thrust the paper in front of my face. I looked at it. My eyes narrowed. I saw my signature at the bottom of the page. Noelle Harmon, but something was wrong. The signature was in blue ink. The rest of the document was printed in black laser toner, but the text of the document was crisp, sharp, and high contrast. The signature was slightly pixelated. It had a faint gray halo around the letters. I knew that signature. I recognized the loop of the N. I had signed that way when I was 25, on a lease agreement for an apartment I rented before I married Ethan. Darlene had been a co-signer because my credit history was young. They had scanned my signature from an old lease. They had cut and pasted it onto a new legal document, and then they had photocopied it to make it look like a single original document. It was forgery, it was fraud, and it was amateur hour. That is not today, I whispered. It is valid, Mason insisted, moving the paper away before I could study it longer. The date is open-ended. It grants Darlene full power of attorney in the event of medical incapacity, which is what we have here. You are confused. You are refusing to pay debts. You are paranoid. Kendra, the thumb, Darlene barked. Kendra moved the tablet closer. The screen glowed with the prompt, Touch ID to confirm authorization. Darlene yanked my arm. Pain shot through my shoulder and down into my fractured ribs. I gasped. A genuine sound of agony. Mom, you are hurting her, Kendra said, pulling back. I am saving her, Darlene shouted. She was losing control. The airport lounge humiliation. The declined card. The fear of poverty. It was all boiling over. She does not get to do this to me. I raised her. I own her success, Noelle. Give me your hand. She grabbed my thumb. She tried to force it toward the tablet. No, I shouted. I didn't whisper this time. I let the fear and the anger explode. Get off me. Just sign it, Darlene screamed, her face inches from mine, her eyes wide and manic. Just sign the authorization. Noelle. You can't use the money anyway while you are in here. Just sign it, and I will give it back later. I promise. I just need to clear the hold on the tickets. I will give it back later. The words hung in the air. Mason Rook froze. He looked at Darlene with a mixture of horror and fury. He knew what she had just done. She had admitted intent. She had admitted that this wasn't about management or paying my bills. It was a loan she was forcing me to make. It was theft. Darlene, be quiet, Mason snapped, but it was too late. Did you hear that? I asked. My voice was suddenly crystal clear. I stopped struggling. I went limp, not in weakness, but in total, calm surrender to the victory I had just secured. I looked at the curtain that separated the room from the door. Marisol, I called out. Did you hear that? The heavy curtain was ripped aside. Marisol stood there. She wasn't alone. Behind her were two hospital security guards, large men in dark uniforms with serious faces. And next to them was a woman in a suit, wearing a badge that read Risk Management/Legal Compliance. I heard it, Marisol said. Her voice was trembling with rage. I heard every word. Get away from the patient. Now. Darlene dropped my hand. She stumbled back, looking at the security guards as if they were apparitions. I was just helping her. You were assaulting her, the woman from Risk Management said. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking with a much more disciplined rhythm than Darlene's. I am Sarah Jenkins, Hospital Administration. We have been listening from the corridor for the last 2 minutes. We heard the patient say no. We heard you try to force a biometric scan. And we heard you admit to attempting to access funds for personal travel. Mason Rook closed his briefcase. He did it slowly, calmly, trying to salvage the situation. There is a misunderstanding here. My client is emotional. We were simply executing a valid power of attorney. The one with the pixelated signature, I asked from the bed. Mason's eyes snapped to me. The confused patient was gone. In her place was the woman who had spent 9 years analyzing pixels and vectors as a graphic designer. I saw the artifacting on the signature line. Mason, I said, sitting up straight. I winced at the pain in my ribs, but I didn't let it stop me. You lifted that from the Avalon Creek lease agreement in 2018. I have the original in my filing cabinet at home. If we send that document to a forensic document examiner, what do you think they will find? Mason's face went pale. Not white, but a sickly, ash-gray color. He knew. He knew that I knew. And he knew that attempting to use a forged document to secure assets in a hospital was a felony. "We are leaving," Mason said abruptly. He grabbed his briefcase. "Darlene, Kendra, we are going." "We are not going," Darlene shrieked. She pointed a finger at me. "She is my daughter. She owes me. You cannot kick me out." "Actually, we can," one of the security guards said. He stepped forward, his bulk filling the space between Darlene and my bed. "Ma'am, you are trespassing, and you have committed battery on a patient. You need to step out of the room immediately, or you will be removed in handcuffs." "Handcuffs," Darlene gasped. She looked at Kendra. "Kendra, tell them." Kendra was backing away, clutching the tablet to her chest. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a realization that was just starting to dawn. "Noelle, you aren't asleep." "No, Kendra," I said softly. "I am wide awake." "This is ridiculous," Darlene spat. She adjusted her coat, trying to regain her dignity. "Fine, we will leave. But Noelle, when you come to your senses, don't come crawling back to me. You have humiliated me for the last time." "You are right," I said. "This is the last time." I reached for the tissues on the bedside table. I lifted the box. Underneath lay my phone. The screen was still glowing. The red timer was at 12 minutes and 45 seconds. Recording. Mason Rook stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at the phone. He looked at the risk management officer, who was also looking at the phone. "Is that—" Mason started, his voice cracking. "It is a voice memo," I said. "It has been running since before you walked in. I have you saying I am incapacitated. I have Darlene admitting she wants the money for tickets. I have the sound of the struggle. And I have you presenting a forged document." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. "That is inadmissible," Mason said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Two-party consent state." "Actually," the risk management officer interrupted, "in a hospital room where there is an expectation of privacy for the patient, and where a crime is being committed, well, let's just say the police will be very interested in hearing it. And I will be interested in a copy for our report on attempted elder, or rather, patient financial abuse." Darlene looked from the phone to me. For the first time in my life, I saw true fear in her eyes, not the fear of embarrassment, the fear of consequences. "Noelle," she whispered. "Baby." "Get out," I said. "Please," she tried, stepping forward. "Get out." The security guard took Darlene's arm. He didn't squeeze, he just guided, but the implication was clear. "This way, ma'am," he said. Darlene looked at me one last time. She didn't see the daughter she had raised to be a bank account. She saw a stranger. They were marched out of the room. Mason Rook went first, walking fast, already pulling out his phone, likely to call his malpractice insurer. Kendra followed, looking at the floor. Darlene was last, looking back over her shoulder, her face a mask of shock. As the door closed behind them, Marisol let out a breath. "You okay, honey?" she asked, rushing to my side to check my vitals. "My ribs hurt," I admitted, leaning back against the pillows. The adrenaline was crashing, and the pain was returning with a vengeance. "Your heart rate is 120, she noted. "But you did good. You did real good." "Did you call the police?" I asked. "Administration is handling it," Sarah Jenkins said. "We have to file a report whenever there is an incident like this. But Noelle, that recording. Keep it safe. Back it up." "I will," I said. I picked up the phone. I hit stop. I tapped share. I sent it to Ethan. I sent it to my personal email. And then, I sent it to Grandpa Miles. I added a text to Grandpa. They brought a drill. I broke the bit. I looked at the empty room. It felt different now. It wasn't a prison. It was a fortress. And for the first time in 9 years, the gate was closed, the drawbridge was up, and the enemy was retreating into the dark. But I knew this wasn't the end. Mason Rook was a cornered rat. Darlene was a desperate narcissist. They wouldn't stop. They would just change tactics. But they had made a fatal error. They thought they were fighting Noelle the victim. They didn't know they had just awakened Noelle the prosecutor. The pad of my thumb hovered millimeters above the glowing glass of the tablet. I could feel the heat radiating from the device, or perhaps it was the heat of my mother's hand clamping down on my wrist. Her fingernails digging into the soft flesh of my forearm like talons. The screen displayed the blue authentication circle, pulsating, waiting for the biological key that would unlock the vault of my life and drain it dry. "Just press it," Darlene hissed, her breath smelling of airport coffee and desperation. "Stop fighting me. Noelle, it is just a sensor." Time seemed to warp, stretching that single second into an eternity. I looked at the fingerprint icon. It wasn't just a security check. It was a seal. If I pressed my thumb down, I was agreeing to be the victim for another decade. I was agreeing that my broken ribs mattered less than her declined credit card. I was agreeing that my son's future was fuel for her furnace. My heart hammered against the wall of my chest, a frantic, thumping rhythm that drowned out the steady beep of the monitor. Darlene pushed down, using her body weight to force my hand. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a bone, it was the tether. I didn't just resist. I reacted with the violent, primal instinct of a cornered animal. I yanked my arm back with every ounce of strength I possessed. The movement was sudden and jarring. The IV line in my hand tugged sharply, sending a fresh bolt of white-hot pain shooting up to my shoulder. But I didn't care. The force of my withdrawal broke Darlene's grip. She stumbled forward, her center of gravity lost, and her hand slapped uselessly against the mattress. "No," I shouted. The sound tore through the quiet room, raw and guttural. It wasn't the polite protest of a daughter. It was the roar of a woman who had found her voice. I didn't lie back down. I engaged my core, ignoring the screaming agony of my fractured ribs, and forced myself upright. I sat up straight, the hospital gown bunching around my waist. With my free hand, I reached up and ripped the nasal cannula from my face, throwing the plastic tubing aside. I didn't need their oxygen. I needed to breathe my own air. I looked Darlene Whitaker dead in the eye. "Get your hands off me," I said. My voice was low, terrifyingly steady, and stripped of all warmth. "Do not touch me again," Darlene blinked, recoiling as if I had slapped her. She looked at her empty hands, then at me, her face contorting into a mask of bewildered offense. She let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh, glancing at Mason Rook for support. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she stammered, smoothing the front of her coat. "Mason, look at her. She is delirious. The pain medication is making her aggressive. Noelle, honey, you are high. You do not know what you are saying." "I am not high," I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed, planting my feet on the cold floor. I wanted to stand, to tower over her, but my body wouldn't allow it yet. So I sat there, a queen on a throne of pillows, passing judgment. "I have never been more lucid in my entire life, Mother." "You are talking nonsense," Darlene said, reaching for me again, trying to soothe the beast she had poked. "You are stressed about the accident. We are just here to—" "Stop." I cut her off. The word was a blade. "Let's review the timeline. Darlene, shall we—" I held up one finger. 2 hours ago, I was lying on a stretcher. My chest was crushed. There was blood on my hands. I picked up the phone thinking you were calling to say you loved me. I held up a second finger. You did not ask if I was okay. You did not ask if I was in pain. You did not ask if I was dying. I held up a third finger, my hand shaking with the force of my rage. You asked for $4,200. You said your card was declined. That was your emergency. My life was hanging by a thread, and you were worried about access to the VIP lounge. Darlene's face flushed a deep, ugly red. I did not know it was that bad. You are twisting my words. I am quoting you, I yelled, my voice cracking. And then you came here. You walked into this room. And did you ask where Leo is? Did you ask if your 3-year-old grandson has a mother coming home tonight? The room went silent. Kendra looked down at her shoes. Mason shifted his weight, checking his watch. Darlene opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You don't even know where he is, I whispered, the realization landing like a stone. You didn't even think to ask. Of course I care about Leo, Darlene shrieked, finding her voice again. But I cannot help anyone if I am stranded in an airport without resources. I am the matriarch of this family. Noelle, I have responsibilities. Your only responsibility is to your own vanity, I spat. Kendra stepped forward then, her eyes wet with tears, but her loyalty firmly planted on the wrong side of the battlefield. She raised the tablet again, moving toward the bedside table where my phone lay. Noelle, please, Kendra begged. Just stop it. You are hurting Mom. Just give us the authorization code. I can bypass the fingerprint if you just give me the phone. She reached for my phone. Don't, I snarled. Kendra froze, her hand hovering inches from my device. If you touch that phone, I said, locking eyes with my sister, I will have you charged with theft. I will have you charged with unauthorized access to a computer system. And since you are doing it across state banking lines, it is a federal crime. Kendra, do you want a felony record to go with that tablet? Kendra snatched her hand back as if the phone were radioactive. She looked at Darlene, panic rising in her chest. Mom, she means it. Mason Rook cleared his throat. He stepped into the line of fire, buttoning his suit jacket, trying to reassert the professional veneer that had been shattered. Mrs. Harmon, he began, his voice dripping with condescension. Let's dial down the rhetoric. We are not thieves. We are simply trying to facilitate a family asset protection strategy. We are supporting the family infrastructure during a crisis. We are trying to help you. I looked at him. I looked at the forged papers in his briefcase. I looked at the way he stood, arrogant and slick. Support the family. I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. You aren't here to support the family. Mason, you are here to drill into the safe. You don't bring a lawyer and a forgery to a hospital bed unless you are planning a heist. This isn't support. It is an extraction. That is libelous, Mason warned, his eyes narrowing. It is only libel if it isn't true, I shot back. Suddenly, there was a sharp rap on the doorframe. We all turned. Marisol was there. But she wasn't just standing guard anymore. She was inside the room, and she had seen Darlene grab my arm. She had seen me rip the mask off. Behind her, the 2 large security guards I had requested were finally moving in, their presence filling the small room with an air of absolute authority. That is enough, Marisol announced. Her voice was clipped, professional, and furious. I have witnessed physical contact initiated by the visitor after being explicitly told to refrain. That is battery, and I am looking at a patient whose heart rate is spiking to dangerous levels. She pointed a finger at Darlene. You, step away from the bed. Now. Darlene looked at the nurse, then at the guards. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her. She wasn't getting the money. She wasn't getting the signature. She was losing. And when a narcissist loses, they attack. Darlene's face twisted. The elegant society woman melted away, revealing something ugly and snarling beneath. Fine, she screamed, flinging her hands up. Throw me out. Treat me like a criminal after everything I did for you. She turned on me, her eyes wild. You are an ungrateful, selfish little brat, she yelled, her voice echoing off the tiled walls. I gave up my life for you, I fed you, I clothed you, I put a roof over your head, And this is how you repay me, by counting pennies, by cutting me off when I need you most. You owe me. Noelle. You owe me everything." The words hit me like physical blows. They were the same words she had used to beat me into submission for 30 years. You owe me. But this time, they didn't hurt. This time, they just bounced off the armor I had forged in the fire of my own anger. I looked at her. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was the calm of the executioner. "I don't owe you a thing," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried more power than her screaming ever could. "I have paid you back," I continued, ticking off the items on my fingers again. "I paid you back with $400,000 over 9 years. I paid you back with my credit score. I paid you back with my anxiety, my therapy bills, and my silence." I took a breath, ignoring the pain in my side. "I didn't lose a mother today, Darlene," I said. "I just realized that I have been paying rent for your love, and the lease is up. I am not renewing." Darlene stared at me, her mouth agape. She had never heard me speak like this. She had never heard the ATM talk back. "You will regret this," she whispered, her voice shaking with venom. "You will be alone. No one loves a selfish woman." "I am not alone," I said, as if on cue. The heavy double doors at the end of the hallway whooshed open. I could hear it from my room. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approached. They didn't sound like the frantic clicking of Darlene's heels. They sounded like the slow, inevitable march of Judgment Day. A shadow fell across the doorway, blocking the light from the corridor. Grandpa Miles stepped into the frame. He was wearing his old bomber jacket and work boots, looking out of place in the sterile hospital environment, yet somehow owning it completely. He held a thick manila folder in his hand. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Mason Rook. "I believe," Grandpa Miles rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, "that you are sitting in my chair." The air left the room. I sank back against the pillows, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving me shaking but triumphant. The ATM was closed, the bank was under new management, and the vault was locked tight. The arrival of Grandpa Miles was not an entrance, it was an atmospheric shift. When Darlene entered a room, she sucked the oxygen out of it, demanding that everyone breathe only when she permitted. But when Grandpa Miles stepped through that doorway, he brought the air back with him. He brought gravity. He brought the unshakable weight of the earth itself. He did not look at me immediately. He did not rush to the bedside to weep or wring his hands. That was not his way. Miles Harmon was a man of geometry and structure. He assessed the structural integrity of the situation first. He stood 6 feet tall, his shoulders broad under the worn leather of his bomber jacket, a garment that had outlasted 3 presidents and, evidently, my mother's patience. Behind him stood Sarah Jenkins from Risk Management, looking grim, and 2 additional security officers who made the first pair look like mall cops. "Grandpa," I breathed, the word escaping me like a prayer. He held up a hand, a single, calloused palm. It was a command to wait, to let him work. He walked past Darlene as if she were a piece of furniture that had been placed inconveniently in a hallway. He walked past Kendra, who shrank back against the wall, clutching her tablet like a shield. He stopped in front of the rolling table where Mason Rook had spread out his forged empire. Mason Rook, to his credit, tried to stand his ground. He puffed out his chest, adjusting his silk tie. "And who might you be?" Mason asked, his voice striving for authority, but hitting a note of nervous vibrato. "We are in the middle of a private family legal matter." Grandpa Miles did not answer. He did not shout. He simply reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick, legal-sized manila envelope. It was not crisp and new like Mason's documents. It was softened at the edges, the clasp worn from years of sitting in a fireproof safe. He dropped it on the table. Thud. The sound was heavy. Final. It sounded like a gavel striking a block of mahogany. "I am not a family member," Miles said. His voice was a low rumble, the sound of a diesel engine idling. "I am the désigné." "Désigné," Darlene scoffed, finding her voice now that the initial shock of his appearance had worn off. Désigné of what? You have no rights here. Miles, you are not her parent. I am her mother. I have the blood right. Blood does not sign checks, Miles said, still not looking at her. He kept his eyes fixed on Mason Rook. And blood does not sign legal contracts. Open the folder. Counselor. Mason looked at the folder. He looked at the risk management officer, who nodded for him to proceed. With a trembling hand, Mason undid the clasp and slid the documents out. I watched from the bed, my heart rate slowing down for the first time in an hour. I knew what was in there. I had forgotten the specifics, buried under 9 years of trauma and busy work. But I remembered the day we signed it. It was a rainy Tuesday, 3 months after my father's funeral. I was 24, grieving, and terrified of the woman who was currently screaming in my hospital room. Miles had taken me to a notary in a strip mall. He had told me, "We build the shelter before the storm comes. Noel." "Read the header," Miles commanded. Mason adjusted his glasses. He read aloud, his voice devoid of its usual slick polish. "Durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances. Springing duration." "Springing," Miles repeated. He turned to Sarah Jenkins. "Ma'am, for the record, can you explain to this gentleman what a springing power of attorney implies?" Sarah Jenkins stepped forward. She was enjoying this. "A springing power of attorney lies dormant until a specific event triggers it," she said, her voice crisp. "Usually, that event is the incapacitation of the principal or a declared state of duress." "Duress," Miles said. He finally looked at me. His eyes were blue and sharp, softening only slightly at the corners. "Noel, are you under duress?" "Yes," I said clearly. "I am? And did you declare this duress to the bank and the hospital staff?" "I did," I confirmed. "I gave the verbal password. Shattered." Miles turned back to Mason Rook. "The moment my granddaughter felt threatened by you, that document on the table became active. It supersedes any implied parental rights. It supersedes any temporary motions you were planning to file. And it certainly supersedes that cut-and-paste art project you have in your briefcase." Mason Rook went pale. He began to flip through the pages of Miles's document. He was looking for a loophole. He was looking for a missing signature, an expired date, anything to save his skin. "It is notarized," Miles said, anticipating the move. "Dated October 2015, registered with the county clerk. And if you turn to page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B, you will see a specific exclusion clause." Mason turned the page. His eyes scanned the text. He stopped. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "Read it," Miles said. Mason stayed silent. "Read it," Miles barked. It was the only time he raised his voice, a sudden crack of thunder that made Kendra jump. Mason read, his voice a whisper. "In the event of activation, the principal explicitly excludes Darlene Whitaker from any and all decision-making authority regarding medical care, asset management, or housing, citing a history of financial conflict." The room went dead silent. Darlene's jaw dropped. She looked at me. Betrayal written across her face in bold, red letters. "You," she breathed. "You wrote that 10 years ago. You wrote that about me." "I wrote it," I said, my voice steady. "Because even then, I knew one day you would come for me. I just didn't think you would wait until I was in a hospital bed to do it." "This is a setup," Darlene shrieked. She turned to Sarah Jenkins. "They are conspiring against me. That old man has always hated me. He brainwashed her. You cannot accept this paper. It is ancient." "It is current," Sarah Jenkins corrected her. "And it is legally binding, Mr. Rook. As an officer of the court, you know that a specific exclusion in a registered POA is ironclad. If you persist in trying to obtain a signature from Mrs. Harmon now, you are not just committing malpractice. You are committing a felony. You are knowingly violating a court-registered directive." Mason Rook closed the folder. He stepped back from the table as if it were burning. He understood the landscape instantly. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a minefield, and he was standing on the trigger. "I was not informed of this document," Mason said quickly, looking at Darlene with open hostility. "My client assured me there were no existing legal instruments. I was operating on bad intelligence." "You were operating on greed," Miles said. "You saw a hurt woman and a loud mother, and you smelled a payout. Pack your bag, son." "Don't you dare!" Darlene grabbed Mason's arm. "You are my lawyer. Do something. Get a judge on the phone." "Darlene, let go," Mason hissed, shaking her off. "It is over. If I call a judge now, I will be disbarred. Do you understand this document proves premeditated intent to protect herself from you? If we push this, they will countersue for abuse of process, and they will win." "I don't care about the law," Darlene screamed. She was unraveling, the threads of her composure snapping one by one. "I care about my money. I need that transfer. The hotel is going to cancel Kendra. Give him the card." She shoved Kendra forward. Kendra, wide-eyed and trembling, held out the platinum credit card, the secondary card I had canceled 40 minutes ago. She thrust it toward Mason. Or maybe toward Sarah Jenkins. It wasn't clear. It was a reflex action. In the Whitaker house, when people were yelling, you threw money at them until they stopped. "Here," Kendra stammered. "Just can we pay a fee to fix this? Mom has a high limit. Just run it." Mason looked at the card with disdain, but Darlene snatched it from Kendra's hand. "Take it," she yelled at Sarah Jenkins. "I will pay for a private room. I will pay for a different doctor. Just get this old man out of here." Sarah Jenkins didn't move, but she had a portable card terminal clipped to her belt, used for processing copays at the bedside. She looked at Darlene, and then she looked at me. I gave a small nod. "I can check the status of the card," Sarah said calmly. To verify identity, she took the card from Darlene's shaking hand. She inserted it into the chip reader. The room held its breath. Darlene stood tall, a defiant sneer on her face. She believed in the power of that plastic. She believed that the magnetic strip contained her soul, her worth, and her authority. She believed that money was the only law that mattered. The machine beeped, a harsh descending tone. Declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Report stolen. Sarah looked at the screen. She looked up at Darlene. "This card has been reported as misappropriated," Sarah said, "and the account is closed." Darlene's face crumpled. It wasn't sadness. It was the look of a statue crumbling into dust. The one weapon she had, the one lever she used to pry open the world, had snapped in her hand. "No," she whispered. "That is a mistake. Run it again." "I cannot run it again," Sarah said, pocketing the card. "I am required to confiscate it. That is my card." Darlene lunged. Grandpa Miles stepped in. He didn't touch her. He just occupied the space between Darlene and the risk management officer. He was a wall of leather and resolve. "It is not your card, Darlene," Miles said softly. "It never was. It was Noelle's card. You were just an authorized user, and the authorization is revoked." He turned to the security guards. "Gentlemen," Miles said, "I am exercising my authority under the power of attorney. I am formally requesting that these 3 individuals be removed from the premises. They are agitating the patient, they are attempting financial fraud, and they are no longer welcome." "On it," the lead guard said. He moved toward Mason Rook. "Sir, the exit." Mason didn't argue. He grabbed his briefcase, leaving the forged papers on the table. He didn't look at Darlene. He walked out the door, his expensive shoes clicking a retreat that sounded suspiciously like running. The guards turned to Darlene and Kendra. "Mom, let's go," Kendra cried, pulling on Darlene's sleeve. "Please, everyone is looking." Darlene looked at me. She looked at the bed where I sat, battered but unbroken. She looked at Grandpa Miles, who stood beside me like a sentinel. "You think you have won," Darlene hissed, her eyes wet and venomous. "But you will need me. Someday, Noelle, you will need a mother, and I won't be there." I haven't had a mother in 9 years. Darlene, I said, I have just had a bill collector. Get them out, Miles ordered. The guards stepped in. One of them took Darlene by the elbow. She tried to shake him off, but he held firm. They escorted her toward the door. She dragged her feet, looking back, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to call out, "Wait, I'm sorry. Come back." I watched her go. I watched the door swing shut. The latch clicked. The sound was small, metallic, and insignificant, but to me, it sounded like the closing of a heavy book, a book I had been reading for too long, full of tragedy and bad debts. Grandpa Miles sighed. It was a long, shuddering exhalation. He slumped slightly, the adrenaline leaving him now that the threat was neutralized. He looked older suddenly. He turned to Sarah Jenkins. "I want an incident report filed," he said. "I want names, times, and a transcript of that recording my granddaughter made. We are going to need it for the restraining order." "I am starting the file right now," Sarah said. She looked at me with a soft smile. "You have a good grandfather, Mrs. Harmon." "I know," I said. Sarah and the remaining guards stepped outside to give us a moment. Miles walked over to the chair beside my bed. He sat down heavily. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just reached out and took my hand, my left hand. The one without the IV. His hand was rough, warm, and trembling slightly. "I am sorry I wasn't here sooner," he said, his voice thick. "You were here when it mattered," I said. "Grandpa, that document, I forgot about the exclusion clause." "I didn't," he said. He tapped the side of his head. "I never forgot. I knew she would try to eat you alive. Noelle, people like Darlene, they don't have a bottom. They are empty buckets. You can pour the ocean into them, and they will still be dry." I looked at the folder on the table. That thin stack of papers had just stopped a tank. "She is going to come back," I said. "She will try to sue. She will try to guilt-trip Kendra into harassing me." "Let her try," Miles said. He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. "We have the law. We have the money secured. And most importantly, Noelle, you have the rage." "The rage?" I asked. "Yes," he nodded. "For a long time. You just had sadness. Sadness is useless against a woman like Darlene. She feeds on sadness. But rage righteous, cold rage, that is a shield. And today, I saw you use it." I looked down at my broken ribs, at the bruises blooming on my skin. I hurt everywhere. But for the first time in my life, the pain felt like my pain. It wasn't something I was carrying for her. "What do we do now?" I asked. Grandpa Miles smiled. It was a grim smile, but it had a spark of mischief in it. "Now," he said. "Now we start the audit." 3 weeks after the accident, the bruising on my ribs had faded to a sickly yellow, and the sharp, stabbing pain of every breath had dulled to a manageable ache. I was discharged from St. Jude's 4 days after the confrontation. But I did not go back to work. I had a different job now. My dining room table, usually reserved for family dinners and Leo's finger painting projects, had been transformed into a war room. Stacks of paper covered every inch of the mahogany surface: bank statements, credit reports, tax returns, and printed text message logs formed a paper range of mountains that separated me from my former life. Grandpa Miles sat opposite me, a mug of black coffee in his hand and a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was the auditor my life had desperately needed. For the past 9 years, I had been too afraid to look at the numbers, terrified that acknowledging the theft would make it real. Now, looking was the only way to survive. "We have the totals for the fiscal year 2019, Miles said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. He pushed a spreadsheet toward me. "Just look at the miscellaneous column, Noelle." I looked. The numbers were black and stark against the white paper. $4,200 a month was the base rent I paid for Darlene's affection. But that was just the subscription fee. The in-app purchases were where the real damage lay. I ran my finger down the list. February veterinary bill for a dog she doesn't own, $800. March donation to the Arts Council, $1,500. June car detailing and ceramic coating, $900. She treated your account like a slush fund, Miles said. She didn't even try to hide it. She assumed you would never audit her. I never did, I admitted, feeling a fresh wave of shame. I just paid it. I thought if I paid enough, she would eventually be happy. You cannot fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Miles reminded me, we did the final math, over 9 years. The monthly transfers alone amounted to $453,600. But when we added the overdrafts, the emergency loans that were never repaid, and the credit card bills she had guilted me into covering, the number ballooned. $612,000. I stared at the figure. I felt the air leave my lungs. That was a house. That was Leo's college tuition at an Ivy League school. That was my retirement. That was the blood and sweat of my 20s and 30s, harvested and burned to keep Darlene Whitaker warm. There is more, Miles said. He didn't look happy about it. He slid a thin single sheet of paper across the table. It was a credit report, a deep dive inquiry that Miles had run using his connections from his days in commercial insurance. What is this? I asked. Look at the active lines of credit, he said. I scanned the list: mortgage, car payment, my student loans, and then a line I didn't recognize: Whitaker Consulting Group, commercial line of credit, guarantor Noel Harmon. I didn't open this, I whispered. I don't have a consulting group. No, Miles said grimly. But your mother does. Or rather, she pretended to. She opened this 3 years ago. She used your Social Security number as the guarantor. It is sitting at $45,000 of debt. She has been paying the minimum monthly payment using the money you transferred to her. I felt the room spin. This wasn't just financial abuse. This was identity theft. This was a felony. She had stolen my name, my credit, and my financial identity to fund a business that didn't exist. She committed fraud, I said. Against me. And against the bank, Miles added. But here's the catch. If we go to the police with this, she goes to jail. Are you ready for that? I thought about the hospital room. I thought about her grabbing my wrist. I thought about the $4,000 she demanded while I was bleeding. I am ready, I said. But I want to do it smart. I don't want a messy trial where she cries to a jury about being a poor, abandoned mother. I want something colder, something she cannot cry her way out of. I picked up my phone. I opened the archived messages from the day of the accident. I found the text string where Darlene had tried to justify her demands. There was one message I had ignored at the time, but now it shone like a beacon. Darlene, you are so ungrateful. That money isn't a gift. Noel, it is my salary. I raised you. I sacrificed my career for you. This is the back pay I am owed for being your mother. Salary, I whispered. I showed the text to Miles. Grandpa, look at this. He read it. A slow, wolfish smile spread across his face. Well now, he said, that changes the texture of things, doesn't it? If it is a salary, I said, my mind racing with the procedural logic I had learned from handling contracts at work. Then it is income. Earned income, Miles agreed. And if it is earned income, I continued, she has to declare it. I went to the stack of tax returns Darlene had accidentally left at my house 2 years ago when she was trying to get me to refinance her condo. I flipped through the 1040 form for 2022. Line 1 wages, salaries, tips. The box was empty. Darlene had reported zero income. She claimed she was retired and living off savings. She didn't declare it, I said. She has taken over $500,000 in salary over 9 years, and she hasn't paid a dime in federal or state income taxes. She hasn't paid Social Security tax. She hasn't paid Medicare tax. Miles leaned back in his chair. You know, the Internal Revenue Service takes a very dim view of people who hide $500,000 of income, and they pay a whistleblower reward, I said, my voice hardening. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like a prosecutor. We spent the next 6 hours assembling the packet. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. We included the spreadsheet of transfers. We included the bank statements showing the money hitting her account and immediately being spent on luxury goods. We included the text messages where she explicitly referred to the money as salary, fees, and compensation. We filled out IRS Form 3949A, information referral. I checked the boxes: unreported income, false exemption, failure to pay tax. In the section for comments, I wrote a simple, concise summary. The taxpayer has received regular monthly payments totaling over $600,000, which she characterizes in writing as salary for domestic services, yet has reported zero income for the past decade. I printed it out. The printer hummed, a rhythmic sound of justice being manufactured. Just as I was stapling the packet, my phone rang. It wasn't Darlene. It was a number I recognized from the business card Mason Rook had left on the hospital table. I put it on speaker. "This is Noelle," I said. "Mrs. Harmon." Mason Rook's voice came through. He sounded different than he had in the hospital. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, breathless quality. "I am glad you picked up. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Mr. Rook, unless you are calling to confess to facilitating fraud." "Please, let's not use that language," he said quickly. "Look, I have spoken to your mother. She is distraught. She understands she overstepped. We want to offer a settlement." "A settlement?" I looked at Grandpa Miles. He shook his head slightly. "Yes," Mason continued. "Darlene is willing to sign a document agreeing to reduce her monthly request to $2,000, and she will agree to attend family therapy. In exchange, you restore her access to the overdraft protection and drop the inquiry into the credit line." I almost laughed. "She wants to settle by stealing less. That is your offer." "It is a peace offering, Noelle," Mason pressed. "Think about the family name. Think about the scandal. If this goes to court, if you file reports, it will be public. Everyone will know. Do you really want to drag your mother through the mud? Do you want your son to grow up knowing his grandmother is a felon? We can keep this private. We can preserve the family honor." I looked at the stack of papers on the table. I looked at the IRS form. "Mr. Rook," I said, "you seem to be under the impression that I care about the Whitaker family honor. I don't. The Whitaker honor is a myth my mother invented to get better tables at restaurants." "Noelle, be reasonable," he pleaded. "If you pursue the credit line issue, I could be implicated as the notary on the application. I didn't know it was fraudulent. But, so you are not worried about my mother," I interrupted. "You are worried about your license." "I am worried about everyone," he snapped. "Mr. Rook," I said, my voice dropping to the temperature of liquid nitrogen, "I am holding a packet addressed to the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. It contains 9 years of bank statements and your client's own admission that this money was unreported salary. I am also holding a police report regarding the identity theft on the Whitaker Consulting line of credit." There was a silence on the other end, a long, terrified silence. "You haven't mailed them yet," he whispered. "No," I lied. "I am walking to the mailbox right now. Noelle, wait, we can—" "Goodbye, Mason," I said. "I suggest you hire your own lawyer. You are going to need one." I hung up. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Kendra. I answered. "What did you do?" Kendra screamed. She was hysterical. I could hear hyperventilating sobs in between the words. "Mom is freaking out. She says you are sending the government to get her. She says you are going to put her in prison." "I am not doing anything, Kendra," I said calmly. "I am just filing my taxes and correcting the record." "She is throwing things," Kendra cried. "She threw the vase. She says it is all your fault. She says I have to fix it. She wants me to give her my savings." "Don't do it, Kendra," I said. "I have to," Kendra wailed. "She is my mom. She says if I don't help her, the IRS will take the condo. Where will she live? She will move in with me. I can't have her live with me. Noelle, I have a roommate." "Then tell her no," I said. I can't. Then that is your choice, I said. But listen to me. Kendra, if you give her money, you are throwing it into a fire. She owes taxes on $500,000. Your savings won't even cover the penalties. Save yourself. You are a monster, Kendra screamed. You destroyed this family. The family was dead a long time ago. Kendra, I said. I just stopped paying for the funeral. I hung up the phone. I turned it off. I looked at Grandpa Miles. He stood up and picked up the thick envelope addressed to the Department of the Treasury. Are you sure? He asked. I looked at the house around me. It was quiet. Leo was asleep in his room. Ethan was in the kitchen, making dinner. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of the first of the month approaching. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. I am sure, I said. Miles nodded. I will drive this to the post office myself. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. Thank you, I said. He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back to me. You know, he said, revenge is usually a hot dish, messy, but this is cold. This is paperwork. And honestly, Noelle, it is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. She wanted money, I said, looking at the empty spot on the table where the packet had been. I am just making sure she gets the bill. Miles left. The door clicked shut. I sat there in the silence. I knew what was coming. The audits, the liens, the seizure of assets. It would take months, maybe a year. It would be a slow, grinding destruction of Darlene's world. She would lose the condo. She would lose the Lexus. She would lose the status she worshipped. She would blame me every step of the way. She would scream my name to anyone who would listen, but she would never be able to touch me again. I picked up my coffee cup. It was still warm. I took a sip. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting for the tax man, and he was much more reliable than my mother ever was. It takes the United States government a long time to turn its head, but once it is looking at you, it does not look away. 18 months have passed since I sat at my dining room table with Grandpa Miles and stuffed a manila envelope with 9 years of resentment and bank statements. For the first 6 months, there was only silence. It was a nerve-wracking, heavy silence where I wondered if I had just thrown a pebble into a canyon. Then, the steamroller arrived. It didn't start with a SWAT team or handcuffs. It started with a letter to Darlene Whitaker regarding an audit for tax years 2014 through 2023. Then came the freeze orders. I was not there to see it happen. But news travels fast in a small town, especially when the woman falling from grace is as loud as my mother. The condo in the Arts District, the one with the perfect light for the painting she never did, is gone. The Internal Revenue Service does not care about sentimental value or lifestyle requirements. They care about assets. They placed a federal tax lien on the property to cover the back taxes, the interest, and the staggering fraud penalties. When Darlene could not pay the assessment because her cash cow had stopped producing milk, they moved to seizure. The foreclosure auction was last Tuesday. I heard it sold for 20% under market value. But the most satisfying detail wasn't the house. It was the job. Darlene Whitaker, the woman who once screamed at a flight attendant because her champagne was not chilled to the correct temperature, is now working. She is not consulting. She is not networking. She is standing behind a counter at a mid-range department store in the mall, selling cosmetics to the kind of women she used to make fun of. I saw her once, from a distance. I was walking through the mall with Leo to get him new sneakers. I saw her in her uniform, a black smock that looked synthetic and uncomfortable. She was scanning a lipstick for a customer, her smile tight and forced, her eyes dead. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like someone who finally understood the value of $1 because she had to stand on her feet for 8 hours to earn it. She didn't see me. I turned Leo around and we walked the other way. I didn't need to gloat. The universe was doing a fine job on its own. The collapse of the Whitaker Empire didn't just crush the Queen. It took down the court as well. Mason Rook thought he could distance himself. He thought he could claim attorney-client privilege, and hide behind his expensive suit, but Grandpa Miles filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association. Attaching the audio recording of Mason attempting to execute a forged document in a hospital room, the bar takes a very dim view of lawyers who participate in elder abuse and fraud. Mason is currently suspended pending a full ethics board hearing. His partners at Rook and Halston dissolved the firm to save their own skins. Mason didn't just lose a client, he lost his career. He cut ties with Darlene the moment the first subpoena arrived, blocking her number and pretending he had never met her, and Kendra, my little sister, the eternal enabler. She called me 6 months ago, sobbing. The fraud investigation into the Whitaker Consulting credit line had widened, because Kendra had allowed her own information to be used on some of Darlene's other schemes, and because she had knowingly attempted to access my accounts with the tablet that night in the hospital. The prosecutor was looking at her as an accomplice. They gave her a choice. She could go to trial and face felony conspiracy charges, or she could accept a plea deal that included probation, restitution, and most importantly testifying against Darlene regarding the financial coercion. Kendra chose herself. She took the deal. She sat in a deposition room and told the truth about how Darlene forced us to open cards, how she forged signatures, how she manipulated us for years. It broke the family apart completely, but it kept Kendra out of prison. We don't talk much now, but the last time we spoke, she sounded different, quieter. She is living with 3 roommates, driving a used Honda, and paying off her share of the restitution. She hates me for starting the fire, but I think, deep down, she is relieved the house burned down. She doesn't have to pretend anymore. As for me, I am sitting on the porch of a house Darlene Whitaker has never seen. It is a craftsman bungalow with a big backyard and a swing set. It is in a different zip code, one where the schools are good and the neighbors mind their own business. The address is unlisted. Yesterday, I received a letter from the Department of the Treasury, Whistleblower Office. It was a formal notification regarding my claim under Internal Revenue Code Section 7623B. The letter confirmed that the information I provided had resulted in the successful collection of unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest from the taxpayer, because the amount in dispute exceeded $2 million once they factored in the penalties and interest over a decade, and because my information was substantial and specific, they awarded me 20% of the collected proceeds. I opened the check. $142,000. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to retire on. It certainly wasn't enough to buy back the 9 years of stress and emotional abuse I had suffered, but as I held that piece of paper, I didn't see it as money. I saw it as a refund. I deposited it this morning. I didn't buy a luxury car. I didn't buy designer bags. I put $50,000 into a 529 college savings plan for Leo. For the first time, the money I earned was flowing forward, toward the next generation, instead of being sucked backward into the black hole of my mother's vanity. I put the rest toward the down payment on this house. My house, a house where the phone doesn't ring at midnight with demands, a house where emergency means a broken pipe, not a declined credit card at a country club. I was drinking my tea, watching Leo chase a butterfly in the grass, when my phone buzzed. I hadn't blocked Darlene's number. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to keep the line open just to remind myself that she couldn't hurt me anymore. Or maybe I just wanted to see the end. It was a text message. Darlene, I hope you're happy. They took the car today. I have to take the bus to work tomorrow. You have destroyed everything. You ruined my life. You destroyed your own mother. I looked at the words. Years ago, a text like that would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and panic. I would have transferred money instantly to fix it. I would have begged for forgiveness. But today I just felt a profound sense of closure. She still didn't get it. She thought I had done this to her. She didn't understand that she had built this trap herself. Brick by brick, lie by lie, dollar by dollar. I had simply stopped holding up the ceiling. I typed my reply. I didn't hesitate. I didn't shake. Noelle, no. I didn't destroy you. You just finally met a bill you couldn't pass on to me. I hit send. Then, I did what I should have done 9 years ago. Block contact. I put the phone down on the porch railing, The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. Leo laughed, a pure, unburdened sound that filled the air. I took a deep breath. My ribs didn't hurt anymore. The air tasted sweet. I do not have a mother in the traditional sense. I don't have the family gatherings or the holiday cards. I have a scar on my credit report and a scar on my heart. But as I watched my son play, safe and secure, I realized the truth. I didn't lose a family. I just stopped paying their salaries. And in exchange, I bought back my own life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment down below with your city and country. And tell me what time it is there right now. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed Noelle's journey to justice, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Emma Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the content, and smash the hype button so more people can hear this story. See you in the next video.